A Welt, wo keiner wird nicht regieren über dem anderens Arbeit und Mie. Frei wird sein jedes Herz und Gehirn. Das ist Anarchie. A Welt, wo Freiheit wird jeden beglicken, dem Schwachen und Starken, dem Er und Sie. Wo deins und meins wird keinem nicht drücken. Das ist Anarchie.
I consider myself an anarchist because I believe in the attainability of a system of society without government.
What were you doing? What were some of your activities within the movement?
Well, what shall I say? I started off as a kid, young fella, got into Syracuse, New York, and a strike broke out spontaneously, Little Falls, New York. And Italian comrades there asked me to go down there and lead the strike. I led the strike down there for several weeks, surrounded many times by gunmen at night in the halls. That time pickets didn't have liberties like they had today. And I conducted that strike until Bill Haywood came down from Patterson and took over. There I left Chicago. Just prior to that, I'd been involved in a strike of Rochester, New York, the clothing cutters. I lost my job. That's why I had to go to Utica. Then Utica involved in the Little Falls strike, so I had to leave there. So I came to Chicago, and I tried to get a job in Chicago and couldn't get a job because the association had me blacklisted. So I went down to St. Louis and tried to get a job, couldn't get that job. Well, then I got back to Chicago. I got active then in the Amalgamated Union and worked as a clothing cutter. Then, during the 1915 strike, I was arrested 39 times.
Now, for most people who've heard of the term anarchism, it's almost a synonym for terrorist. The anarchist is a wild-eyed, wild-haired person with a black cape, with a dagger in one hand, a bomb sputtering already in the other.
Your grandfather was an anarchist. He was a philosophical anarchist. He believed that people should live together in peace, and he didn't throw bombs, and that's always irritated my father tremendously, that people thought that all anarchists were bomb throwers and never bothered to learn what the ideas of Kropotkin or any of the other anarchists were.
In alle Klassen, wo man geht, hört man Sabastofkes. Jinglach, Mädach, Kind und Cage, Schmusen, Pumpre, Bockes.
Jinglach, Mädach, Kind und Cage, Schmusen, Pumpre, Bockes. Genug schon wieder Horven, genug schon Borgenleien. Macht das Sabastofke, lo mir Brüder sich befreien. Macht das Sabastofke, lo mir Brüder sich befreien. Brüder und Schwester, lo mir den Körper in die Hand. Lo mir Nikolai, Kalender, brechen die Wend. Hey, hey, da läuft heute, hey, da läuft am der Scharwitz. Rasse, hey, hey, da läuft Polizei, da läuft am der Scharwitz. Rasse. Brüder und Schwester, lo mir gehen zusammen. Lo mir Nikolai kennen, begraben mit der Mann. Hey, hey, da läuft Polizei, da läuft am der Scharwitz. Rasse.
Nächten hat geführt, hat weggelemist. Heute ist geworden, ein Kapitalist.
Hey, hey, da läuft Polizei, da läuft am der Scharwitz. Rasse.
What happened is this: just as in Soviet Russia, the communists used anarchist slogans. When, for instance, Lenin promulgated the slogan of the factory to the workers, the land to the peasants, all power to the Soviets. This is pure and simple anarchism. Remember, he never mentioned in all these three slogans, not the state, not the dictatorship of the proletariat. This is just a lie. It's not true. They're not going to give all the power to the... They're not going to give all the power to the Soviets. They're not going to give the factories to the workers. They're not going to give the land to the peasants. Everything will belong to the state. And he was against joining the Bolsheviks, against joining the communists here, and many of the young anarchists, most of the young anarchists, the most active, broke away from the Yiddish anarchists, broke away from the Freie Arbeiterstimme, and weakened it. On July the 4th, 1890, they started with the Freie Arbeiterstimme. The paper, from its very inception, was an economic paper, an anarchist paper, spreading the ideas of a society without government, without coercion, without force, without wars. The immediate task of forming unions to help to relieve the economic situation of this sweatshop worker, and at the same time helping develop Yiddish culture, Yiddish theater, Yiddish poetry, Yiddish literature.
Yeah, no, we had plenty of fights with scabs, but we had a nice way how to hit them with the knee. Myself and Rozmirsky, because, you know, the policeman watches you, and if you hit him with your hands, then he arrests you. So we shouldn't be arrested, so I used to with my knee. The policeman said once to the judge, you know, I was arrested and it came to the trial. So the judge asked him, what did you do? He says, Your Honor, she hit me. So he gives a look, and I was standing in the pit. So he says, she hit you? She's so small. He says, Your Honor, she jumped up. It was true, I slept. Well, we all tried to do our best.
Wie lang werdet ihr bleiben noch schlafen und drogen wie Schändlichkeit? Wie lang werdet ihr Grenzen der Reichtum erschaffen, bei dem, was bereut euer Bräut? Wie lang werdet ihr Grenzen der Reichtum erschaffen, bei dem, was bereut euer Bräut? Wie lang werdet ihr stehen, euer roten Gebäuden, der niedrig hält das verschwand? Es doch schon verkäuft, hätten da ihre Augen, der kennt euer eigene Macht. Es doch schon verkäuft, hätten da ihre Augen, der kennt euer eigene Macht. Ich bring euch a Gries für die Trenches, ich bring euch a Gries für die Boys. Wir kämpfen mit Mut, mit Courage, mit Blut, und wenn die Deutschen lachen, sie sich aus.
Mobs and mobs of people chased the anarchists. The Attorney General was a man named Palmer. And the raids were made against all radical halls and homes of individuals, and they'd go to a place and they'd wreck the office, they'd break the machines, they would arrest people on no charges at all, let them out, then arrest them again.
America entered the war in April of 1917. Alexander Berkman and Emma Goldman and many of the people associated with the Freie Arbeiterstimme conducted rallies and made speeches trying to discourage people from registering for the draft. And eventually they were prosecuted. There was several laws that passed during the First World War. Espionage Act was one of them, for example, under which many anarchists and wobblies and militant socialists were tried and eventually convicted, sent to prison, and then ultimately deported. In one boatload alone on the Buford in December of 1919, the cargo contained 250 anarchists who were being shipped back to Russia, including Emma Goldman and Alexander Berkman.
So I didn't go home. But they went to my house, and they came into the room. I had a room with people there. When they came in, the people let them in, so they looked over the literature, and they saw my books were all on anarchism. And they were looking for something to get to recognize me. But after they didn't find anything there, they looked at the wall, they saw a painting hanging. So they asked the people whose painting it is, so they said, that's mine. And they took all that painting and they hung it up in the police station. And 20 years later, I came in with Nelson, we were arrested, and brought into that precinct. And Nelson says to me, give a kick. And I looked up and there was my painting hanging. 20 years after that.
In case of need, one for the other. We wouldn't hesitate or stop at any time.
That's what Kropotkin called mutual aid.
And within our means of physically and financially. And we've been doing it.
Inspired by the work that Francisco Ferrer had been doing in Spain until he was martyred. And anarchists in America and in many countries organized such free schools where the children went to school and did not have to do anything that was set out by a teacher, but did the things they wanted to do.
The school as it was run, and it was run differently often at different times throughout the years that it was in existence, but the period that I remember, there was a great attempt to keep apart politics and religion and everything else from the school. The school was run by the kids, more or less, with the adults. It was they had a common meeting, and we ran the school. You didn't have the kind of generation gap which we've seen in recent years, because there was nobody you were fighting against, in effect. The teachers were there, and they usually were called by their first name, and they were one of us all. You weren't forced to go to classes. You weren't forced to have marks or anything else. You could decide what you wanted to do, so that the authority came from not only yourself, but the whole student and school community.
And I really lived anarchism. And I feel that anarchism you have to live, not only preach it and talk about it, you have to give an example of yourself.
Henrik Ibsen, in 1870, writing a letter to Georg Brandes, said, tie yourself to a star and sail with it. Every person must have a star, an ideal to which he clings. The ideal may not be realized today or tomorrow, but you must have an ideal which will carry you forward in life, will inspire you to do deeds and acts.
Come here. Because, you know,
I don't want to be a secretary.
No,
I want to see anarchists, you know, who like
now, wait a minute. We are in a hurry. They may shut off the electricity from now between 3 o'clock.
They will?
Yeah, anytime.
So what purpose is all
He is the secretary of the managing committee of the Trial. Now, aside from this, he is a retired master mariner. He helped us win the Second World War by convoying help and material in ships to Murmansk. He also did another thing.
Who's got a cigarette?
Nobody has a no. He also helped break through the British blockade around Palestine and smuggle illegal immigrants to Israel. Now tell him.
Palestine. There was no Israel there. There was Palestine.
Well, actually, we're here filming the closing in the Freiarbeider Stimme. So we were talking, are you still as idealistic as you were when you first read the Freiarbeider Stimme?
You have to be idealistic, otherwise you might as well take a gun and blow your brains out.
We are living in a society without slaves, poverty, misunderstanding, social injustice, all the wrongs of society. And there are people foolish like myself and many others, call ourselves anarchists, who feel that this injustice can be done away with, that people can be educated. We must in our soul believe that justice must prevail. We must have that concept that we are going to carry on little by little. You see, the trouble is when you get people into a movement and they see the revolution over tomorrow, and it doesn't come tomorrow, they become disillusioned. They were never revolutionaries. They never had a concept, a true understanding. If the understanding, no matter what happens, you will carry on that ideal. You feel that justice must prevail. The concept of justice, moral certainty, that right is right. It is the doctrine that no matter what you call it, anarchist syndicalist, anarchist individualist, anarchist communist, whatever label you put to it, what is the ultimate goal of all these scattered ideas? Whether it's the idea of Proudhon, whether it's Kropotkin, whether it's Malatesta or anyone else. Each one had little variations. But the ultimate ideal, the ultimate concept of all of these people was ultimate human justice for everybody. And that is the ideal that anarchism stands for.
You see, anarchist movement is not the movement that you have a say, or like the communists, you impose things of your ideas. We don't. We can talk to them, agitate it, but we don't impose. So you do as you please.
Anarchism is a philosophy which rejects all forms of government. It's the only radical movement. It's the only radical movement which wants to get rid of the government right now. Freedom now is an anarchistic slogan, to abolish the state. The anarchists see the state and the church as the twin evils of oppression in modern society. In addition to opposing the state and wanting to abolish or do away with the state, all anarchists believe in a decentralized form of society. They saw the great trends of the 19th, 20th century seem to be, at least superficially, towards more and more centralization, great hierarchies, where the individual was losing his sense of individuality and his power to the state, both economic and political. So the anarchists were individualists, they were federalists in advocating a loose-knit, decentralized society. They were anti-statists, they were anti-militarists, passionately against warfare, preaching love and brotherhood rather than hatred and war.